If you like to read, if you like to think, if you like to see the world differently, grab yourself a book, give this show a listen. Purple Lit Nerd gonna show you what you're missing.
Hooray! Welcome to the Purple Lit Nerd podcast for April the 14th, 2018. I am your host, the amazingly adorable Rebecca Thistle, podcasting to you live-ish from my kitchen/dining room table in my apartment, which I call Jeffrey Thistlework. Yay! So, sonnets. It is so almost creepy how much I love sonnets, if you didn't guess from last week's show. So last week we talked about the history. I say we as though it's just more than me doing this. But anyways, it talked about the history of the sonnet, the very brief history, and probably kind of garbled history of the sonnet. This week, let's talk about the structure of the sonnet. So I remember when I was a kid, and I was first learning about writing poetry and stuff, I remember thinking that a sonnet, like, all you had to do for a sonnet was write a poem that had 14 lines. And that was it. And then I grew up, and I went to college, and I didn't finish my degree, but I took some really awesome classes in the process, and I had a couple of really awesome teachers who taught me all about sonnets. Dr. Richard Macklemore, I don't know how much he's going to appreciate me saying his full name on my show, but hey. Hi, Dr. Macklemore. He was my favorite professor. Anyways, he, I think, was the first teacher to really, like, break it down for me, and I went, oh, that makes sense. Right. Groovy. And Dr. Larry Bonds, was the one who taught me all about Shakespearean sonnets. And that was, like, life-changing. Because now I am a total nerdgasm anytime I talk about Shakespeare. So, anyways, so what is the format of the sonnet? Well, obviously, 14 lines. And if you recall from last week's show, we have essentially two sonnet formats to go from here. And so I'm gonna do my best to make sure to acknowledge both. But as I said last week, my favorite kind of sonnets. Oh, my all caps someone is going to be so amused by that. Oh, I'm making myself laugh. It's early in the morning. I haven't fully woken up. My brain is in a really weird place. Anyways, but my favorite kind of sonnets are Shakespearean, because I got to give it to my homeboy Big Willie. Oh yeah. So, first and foremost, let's talk about rhythm and meter, because there's a couple of things I have to define for you before I explain things. And so both Italian and Shakespearean sonnets employ iambic pentameter. Well, I mean, basically everything Shakespeare does is in iambic pentameter, but that's for another series of shows. So what is iambic pentameter? I mean, I remember, like, I always heard that in school. Yes, Shakespeare wrote an iambic pentameter. Nobody ever broke it down for me. I mean, they tried. Bless their hearts. They tried to explain stressed, unstressed syllables and shit like that. Nope. Did not penetrate my skull. Let me tell you what did penetrate my skull. A song called, and this is going to sound really weird, but it is called Flow Like Poe, and it is by MC Lars. Yeah. So, and I mean, yeah, it's about Edgar Allan Poe, but he also explains how rhythm and meter work in poetry. So as I have said before, and I will probably say a million times again, if this were a professional podcast, and if I were a professional audio wizard, I would have the audio clip of this ready to go and just hit the button and play it. But this isn't. I'm not. I don't. So I get to recite it. Let's do this. Okay, so he's, what is it he said? An iamb is 2 syllables, unstressed, stressed, which the words insane explain and delight all express. Yes. So it's the first syllable is not stressed and the second syllable is. Now, here's my problem. Never mind. Let me scoot right along. So that's what an iamb is. It's all to do with how the syllables are stressed. So you're going to have a stressed, unstressed pair. Now, pentameter refers to how many pairs of unstressed stressed syllables there are. And lost my train of thought for a second. Hold on. Bear with me, people. And so when we talk about pentameter, because there's a lot of different kinds of meter, but when we talk about pentameter, we're talking about 5 pairs of these unstressed stressed syllables. So the line that I always revert back to that, penetrates my head as being like, oh yes, that is iambic pentameter, is what was it? I think it's from King Lear. As a horse, my kingdom for a horse. Yeah. I know, that's very difficult to explain it orally. But yes, that's iambic pentameter. And both Shakespearean and Italian sonnets employ iambic pentameter. Now, here's my problem with saying, oh yes, you must use iambic pentameter, and that is the hallmark of a good sonnet. Everything can be freaking iambic in meter. Whether it's pentameter, or tetrameter, or trimeter, whatever. Everything can be if you say it right. Because, it might sound weird, but you can stress syllables over and over and over again. So in my mind, as long as you've got 10, maybe 11 syllables in there, you can sort of get away with having an 11th syllable. I'll just say that. As long as you've got 10 syllables in there, it's freaking iambic pentameter. It's all in the execution of it. That's the way that I see it. So that covers the rhythm and meter thing in sonnets. Now, next is the rhyme scheme, and that's, I'm going to try and make this as simple as possible. So when you are analyzing rhyme scheme, oh my gosh. When you're analyzing rhyme scheme, you look at that last syllable, obviously. And so when you see that last syllable, you put a letter next to it. So the first syllable, or the first line of the poem, you put an A next to, and then if the next line rhymes with it, then you put an A next to that one. If it doesn't, then you put a B next to it. And then the third line, if it rhymes with the first line, then you put an A next to it, et cetera, et cetera. So you're basically isolating, like, vowel sounds or words or, whatever, rhymes, and saying, okay, this word is the A syllable, this word is the B syllable, and this word rhymes with the A syllables, So, I don't know. Go look it up on YouTube. If this is not making any sense to you, go look it up on YouTube. Somebody will sort you out. So with Italian sonnets, they generally used ABBA, ABBA, and then CDE, CDE, or CDC, CDC. Okay? Shakespearean sonnets generally used AB, AB, CD, CD, EF, EF, GG, with the Spenserian, couplet at the bottom. I call it a Spenserian couplet, but that's like the 2 lines at the bottom. So that's the difference between rhyme schemes in the Italian form and it's kind of easier to rhyme in Italian. So usually that ABBA, ABBA was easier than it is in English, which is what Thomas Wyatt and Henry Howard, Earl of Surrey, learned the hard way. So the actual structure of the lyrical content of sonnets is, like I said, 14 lines, and basically it's separated out into 3 quatrains, which is to say 3 4-line chunks, and then your couplet. That's how Shakespeare organized it. In the Italian format, you usually have your first 8 lines sort of set up this lyrical snapshot, and then, and present this problem, usually like, I'm in love with this woman and she is so beautiful, but I cannot have her, sort of thing. And then the last 6 lines sort of present the solution, which usually ends in something like death in Italy. Whereas with Shakespeare, what it is it's the 3 quatrains. So usually the first 2 quatrains set up the problem, or it's set up it's almost like the setup to the joke almost. But then in that 9th line, there's a shift. There's a sort of either in the first 8 lines, the problem has been set up as you would see in an Italian sonnet, or, maybe there's a shift in perspective on the issue. So there's usually that 9th line will begin with a word like but or however. Well, maybe not however, because we're talking in iambic pentameter, but something like that. But there'll be some kind of shift word that indicates that, hey, we're kind of moving into a different frame of mind within this poem. And then that last quatrain will sort of go with that shift, and then the last 2 lines sort of wrap the whole thing up. I hope this is all making sense to everybody, because it's making a lot of sense to me. So that's the sonnet format. That's how it works. And I would like to recite for you my favorite Shakespearean sonnet, which no one ever gives props to. Actually, no, like, the only time I've ever heard anybody recite any part of this poem in pop culture at all is, it was actually in 10 Things I Hate About You, which is how I went, you know what, I need to read that sonnet. And then I read it all the way through, and I went, yeah, that's my favorite sonnet. And, and I've read most, if not all of his other sonnets, but 141 is still my favorite. So, in faith I do not love thee with mine eyes, for they in thee 1,000 errors note, but 'tis my heart that loves